Hello.
Scooting.
Welcome to the last half day of BSidesSF 2019. Right now we have a good panel for you, but before we do that, I do want to I want to tell you a couple things. First of all, there's a playing of Hackers tonight. If you want to go to it, you got to get tickets. You can get them at bsidessf.org/hackers. The other thing I was asked to tell everybody was please take your garbage with you when you leave the room. We're not going to be cleaning up after you. Well, actually, we probably will have to, so please don't make us. So right now, this is the 1:30. If you are here for this panel, you're in the right place. If you're not, the door is over there. So the panel discussion is Career Mutation, a panel on the evolution of management and security. I'm going to hand it over to you.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for coming today. My name is Zach Powers. I'm the CISO at One Medical. Prior to that, I was the Vice President of Enterprise Security for Salesforce and a plethora of years of engineering. And I'm here today with a bunch of really awesome people that I've worked with in my past who all transitioned into managing and security. So I'm going to let them introduce themselves before we dive into some questions here.
Hi, everyone. My name is Dorros. I'm currently at Stripe leading security infrastructure. Just a little bit about how I got into security, and the talk about nonlinear career paths was awesome. Mine's pretty plain in comparison. But how I got into security, I wanted to go to grad school at Carnegie Mellon and couldn't afford that. So I found this scholarship that would allow you to go there if you studied security, and then if you worked for the government afterward to pay it back. And I thought, I'm gonna scam them. I'm gonna go there. I'm gonna say that I'm studying security and not really. And I ended up absolutely loving security, and I've been working in it ever since. And then just real quick, how I got into management. We had a bit of a leadership void at a startup that I was at because our manager left and we had no leader for a while. And so I just started doing those things that the manager was doing. And then I went to our director and had like a pitch of like, here's my roadmap for the team. Here's what I want to do. I think I could do this. They didn't go for it right away. But they were very supportive and allowed me to sort of go to some classes and learn about management, and I've been sort of doing it ever since.
Nice. So you elbowed your way in.
Yeah.
Sharon.
Cool. My name is Sharon Wong. I'm a TLM at Google Security Assessment Team. And I've spoken to many people who are confused about what TLM is, which is quite natural. Stands for Tech Lead Manager. And it's basically, in a nutshell, I'm an engineer that also manage other engineers. So for me, I got to spend around half of my time in doing Icee work and doing technical contributions, while the other half managing a group of 5 engineers. So I started in Google in 2016, and around 2017, I became a tech lead on the team. And a year later into that, I realized that I not only enjoy giving the technical advices to folks working on our team, but also trying to help them with their career growth and getting people onboarded into Google and things like that. So around mid of last year, I spoke to my manager, who at the time were managing 25 people directly, and I asked him, maybe you also need some help with people managing some engineers on the team. And I felt like I really liked that part of being a manager as well. And he said that's great. And there's actually a role in Google that's doing kind of half IC work and half management work. And that's how I got into management. So now it's 9 months since that change was checked into production. We don't have too much outage yet. And I spoke to my manager, and he hasn't got any customer complaints from my customers either. So I take that as a good sign for me to march forward with my responsibilities.
Thanks. Hi, everyone. I'm Rachel. I'm Senior Manager of Application Security at One Medical. I've been in the security space for just over 8 years, but I've recently made the switch into management within really the past 6 months. So I lead a very small team of 2, but we're growing. Come talk to me afterwards if you're interested. But to be honest, if I had looked back at my career to about 3 years ago, and if you had asked me if I wanted to be in management, I probably would have just laughed at you. It was never something that I kind of envisioned for kind of what I wanted looking into the future. But as I kind of started looking at all the different types of projects and programs that I was kind of naturally drawn to, a lot of them ended up being more management oriented. So things like mentoring new team members, building out team processes, how do we streamline the work that we're doing? It just felt like kind of a natural fit. And so within the past 6 months, I just dove straight in and haven't looked back.
Daed Latrope. I lead security for Cisco Meraki, formerly at Salesforce with most of these fine folks. I originally got into security by way of following in with a bad crowd, and management was somewhat similar. You watch a bunch of your friends like get into managing, you're like, that person should never be responsible for other humans. If they're doing that, I can probably do this too. Really, the realization that it doesn't matter how good your findings are if you're not able to help people understand them and drive a passion to fix them, it doesn't matter.
Nice. My name is Kyle Tobener. I'm a director of enterprise security at Salesforce. I've been in security for about 8 years too, similar to Rachel. I got into management because as an Icee in my function, I was really, really opinionated about kind of the strategy and operations of my team, and I kept thinking like, I can do this better, I can do this well, I can change this to a way I think would run more smoothly. So when the opportunity came up, I actually talked to Zach and was like, let me do this. And he
was
did.
really opinionated. So what I want to do is open this up free form, and you guys feel free to answer the questions however you see fit here, but what opportunity, before you became a manager, what opportunity do you wish you had as an Icee, as an engineer, that would have helped you out now as a manager? Kyle, you're
looking at me? All right. So this kind of plays into how I became a manager. I'd been talking to my boss at the time, and I said, I think I want to be a manager. I think that's an opportunity I want. Can I take some training? And he's like, sure, go take the training. And a couple months later, I'm in the training. Day 2 of the training, my boss left the company. And I was like, well, shit. I wish I'd taken this 2 weeks ago. So, the timing is critical. I think if you want to be a manager at some point, starting early is a really good idea because you never know when that opportunity will present itself for you to jump into the leadership role.
Yeah. And I suspect we're all going to have basically the same answer to this. I wish I had had training or mentorship or adult supervision, but most of those things didn't really happen. So I've sort of tried to be that for others who are looking a few years down the road.
I think I was really lucky in the space when I was considering moving into management. I was actually working for Kyle at the time, and he suggested that I take some of the different management classes that maybe he didn't get the full benefit of before he moved into that spot. Because I think for me, the thing that I didn't really understand about moving into management was like, what about the people stuff? Like I understood like the other side of the world, but what do you do when you have to potentially fire somebody or have a conversation about like lack of performance? That gave me a lot of anxiety. And so getting to kind of sit in some of the training classes where they teach you some of those skills about what you do in those situations really helped me to get that different perspective of what it would be like to kind of be a manager that I thought was actually super helpful.
I actually want to provide some counterpoints to all the fine points that people mentioned. When I got started in management, I wasn't confident in the management space at all. So I enrolled myself into a lot of trainings. And also, apart from that, I tried to read as many books as possible for crucial conversations, how to give feedbacks, how to do coaching and stuff like that. And it turns out there are so many frameworks in the world, and if you try to memorize all of that, I felt like I was confined into the prison of all these kind of structures. And when I tried to give feedbacks into coaching, I always worried that I wasn't good enough because I wasn't following exactly how people were doing it in the right way. So eventually I realized that the best self I can present is just to be authentic. There's nothing better than bring your authentic self and to be genuinely care about the people that work for you, and then to work with them as a partner.
This somewhat leads into the next question, and Chris, I want to start this off with you. Something you're hearing is that when you step into management, you have to balance a lot of different topics, and you often haven't been trained in many of those. So how do you balance being a manager, managing people, managing teams, with learning all these business skills that the higher-ups expect of managers, while still staying technical and staying on top of security? How do you deal with all that?
Yeah, sure. And I think this is something I still struggle with today, and I don't know whether I'll ever get perfect at this. But one of the things that I've been sort of experimenting with lately is setting a theme for each of my days. And so I'll have a day where I spend that day on team coaching. I'll do one-on-ones that day. I'll make sure I'm really looking out for how everyone is doing and the health of the team. And then the next day is like, oh, that project that I'm sort of project managing, let me spend that day focused on that and moving the needle on that one. And then I think sort of in addition to these sort of experiments, you really have to practice that muscle of letting some things go. So it is important to stay technical, of course, but you also have to make sure that you build trust with the people on your team such that when they come to you with a decision, you're right there and you support them, and you might have to use a sort of a disagree and commit model, but that's super important.
And for me, being in a TLM role basically means that I got to spend at least 50% of my time on Icee work and technical contributions. So for me, it wasn't too challenging to stay on the technical track. And then for learning more business skills, I actually don't like reading too many kind of directly business focused books, but I do like reading things like history, culture, diplomacy, and philosophies. So those kind of things I feel like even though they're not directly contributing to your business skills, but they definitely help me to grow, to have more humility, more sympathy, as well as having a better way to structure my arguments when I want to give feedbacks and things like that.
I think the biggest thing for me is kind of similar to Chris, is to have kind of dedicated time set aside specifically for technical work. It's so easy to kind of get drawn into the latest fire of the day and kind of lose some of that. So one of the things that my team does is we have bug hunting every other week, and so that's dedicated 2 hours on my calendar that I never schedule over. And so that kind of helps make sure I have that time to make sure I don't lose the technical side of things, because that's, even though I'm in a management position, it's still important to kind of keep those technical skills up. So
I'm gonna sort of cheat and say I try and spend my time on places where those all come together as much as possible. So if I'm spending time with our product and business folks, understanding better how I can give them an overall sense of risk and what's most important to our customers, I'm hitting most of those buttons. If I'm spending time with my team, helping them understand more about our business, same thing goes. So it's definitely difficult to keep on top of all the plates spinning, but the more that I feel like it's ticking multiple boxes, the more I'm convinced I'm using my time well.
My counterpoint to all of this, I guess, would be that I am trying specifically to lose a step technically. I think my team can benefit from my technical expertise, sure, but they depend on my business savvy. They depend on my ability to get them resources, to fight for opportunities for them, and that's where I want to be spending my time. And I'd rather be depending on them for their technical expertise and leveling them up. So,
yeah, I consider it a failure if I am the most technically qualified to do a job on my team. I'm like, this is bad, and we need to hire someone.
Exactly.
So I want to play on that a little bit. The classic conundrum going into security management is we all at one point in time thought we were really good at what we were doing. How do you then learn to trust others? How do you move from being that implementer to a delegator to where you're saying, I'm not going to do this myself, and it's okay to delegate it to somebody else, knowing that they might not succeed? How do you handle that as a manager? Because that's what you're talking about right now, Kyle, is taking that step back and asking others to be the most technical, right?
You have to deliberately practice giving people the space to fail, which, when you're kind of an alpha, I want to succeed all the time personality is really, really hard. But it's really important for people to feel like they can do a good job, or maybe if it's a new territory for them, maybe they're not going to do an amazing job, but they're going to learn. That's important too, because if they stick with you for a couple years, you're going to have a much better security talent if they've had a few failures along the way to grow.
And I think taking the long view really helps. It's like, sure, I might be the better person for this job right now. Do I still want to be doing it in 3 years? No.
Yeah, spot on.
I think there's also that loss of ownership that's definitely hard during the initial transition from Icee to management. When I was brought on at One Medical, I was building a lot of programs and processes and helping to revise the way that we were doing a lot of things. And when I kind of transitioned into that management role, it was all this work that I had created. I was the single owner of. I now had to hand to another person to kind of help run and manage and change it in ways that maybe I didn't necessarily think of. And that's hard to go from being the single owner of a project, feeling like your decisions are the ones that are helping to drive it, to have somebody else take that on and kind of move it in a different direction. It's definitely something that I struggle with, but I think it's important to be able to give people those opportunities.
And I got to be honest, since I'm only 9 months into management, I don't have perfect answer to this. I'm still learning how to do more delegation to my reports. So one thing we do well on the team is that there are always chores that we want to kind of get done, but nobody are very interested in those. So we try to consolidate all of those into a ops interrupts week, where we rotate people on that interrupts so that the whole team can share the burden of that. So at least that's how our team can try to delegate some part of the chore work into the whole team.
Yeah, I think I'll just really want to underscore what Rachel said, Jen, and just call out how difficult that really was to get through that hump for me. It's sort of rooted in fear that up until that point, I was in full control of my own performance. I knew where all the bodies were buried for the systems that I was building. I knew how to keep them running. And as soon as you make that switch, all of these other people on your team, that now reflects on you. My manager didn't care that someone on the team wasn't doing such a great job. They want me to make sure that the team is operating smoothly, the right people are there, the performance is good. And so that was just quite a hard shift. And building that trust and making sure that you have the right people is like super important.
So I want to turn this around a little bit for some of the people in the audience. I don't know if any of you are considering going into management. If you are, high five, it's a horrible job. What might you give engineers? What advice? How do they manage their own manager? How do they get their manager to help them out with their own career growth? Because as many of you have talked privately, it's something that not every manager does. So what advice could you give? We'll start this off with Kyle down the end.
Okay. I think what I look for the most in an Icee is someone who's willing to take on challenges. So, the Icees on my team that tend to be the ones with the best performance and are highly operating to me are the ones who are looking at what's on my plate and taking as much of it away as they can, finding opportunities and grabbing things for me, and that gives me more space to then invest back in them. So looking to, have meetings with other teams, look for opportunities for projects that can potentially get them up to their next level. I think the less on my plate, the more I can take on their behalf.
And I can say I was actually that person for Kyle. So I used to work for Kyle back in the day. And I was actually the worst Icee on the planet. Every time we would sit in one-on-ones, he'd be like, what do you want out of your career? What are you looking for? And I'm like, I don't know. I don't really know. I think things are going okay, seems fine. He would ask me if I was interested in management. I'm like, that's not really kind of what I'm looking for. And so I think having a strong support system of somebody who can potentially see that in you is actually really helpful. But if you're not in that position, ultimately, as an Icee, you need to be driving your own career. Your manager can't read your mind. Luckily, Kyle kind of could, but that's not always going to be the case. So really kind of thinking carefully about, what is it that you're trying to get out? What are different opportunities that you want to try? Even just knowing the things that you don't like can actually be really helpful for your manager to identify new opportunities to flex some of your skill set to help figure out what the right career path is for you. So have that conversation with your manager as early and as often as you can to really kind of help figure out what the right path for you.
Yeah, I would echo that. Make sure that they know what you're excited about doing. They should start that conversation, but if they don't. And then also, basic stuff often really screws people over. So make sure you're on the same page about how they're going to be measuring success, what your performance is based on, how they like to ingest the information. That'll go a long way.
Yeah, exactly what they said. And one of the first things I try to do is not only set expectation for me expecting what my reports want to do, but also setting expectation of what they want to get out of me. So I think this is kind of a two-way communication where you want to set all those out straight.
Yeah, just plus one to what everyone said already. I think great managers are going to be looking out for the people on their team and trying to figure out what's next for them in career development, but even the best managers can't read your mind. And so just sort of put yourself in the manager's position and think if I go to this one-on-one and say I don't know what I want to do, tell me what to do. Versus here's where I want to go, this is where I want to go in the next 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, help me get there. Think of how much more exciting that's going to be and how you're going to actually motivate your manager to help you get it to the right place.
So something I often hear from engineers that I talk to who are somewhat curious about getting into management is they think that they're not going to be marketable once they become a manager, because security engineers are incredibly marketable. We all know that. What do you guys think about that? Do you feel that engineering management is a marketable career? You know, that fear of, oh my gosh, I won't be able to get a job again that so many people talk about.
Are people going to be insulted if I just laugh maniacally now?
I mean, that was me. I literally said that. I was like, well, if I take this job, if I move into management, like, it was very easy for me to see what the opportunities that were out there that were in the kind of the technical space. I feel like that's very easy to access. But I was legitimately concerned that if I moved into management, that I'd be kind of stuck in one role, one position, one organization, kind of for the rest of my life, which again is kind of silly now thinking about it, but I just don't think it was as broadcast, and the awareness wasn't necessarily there for me. So yeah, you're definitely still marketable. And if anything, you can always go back. Right. Just because you move into management doesn't mean that you're stuck there forever. As long as you continue to invest in your technical skills like most of us have on this panel, you have the opportunity to go back into an IC role if that's something that you'd rather do.
And I think there's an increasing awareness of that as a viable career path. It's not like, oh man, you were in management and now you're out, what's wrong with you? It's more like, no, I just like both. Like, I know a lot of friends like that who continue to be successful, and don't try and do both at once. I will put that caveat out there, but in terms of alternating, because you want to keep your skills fresh and sometimes like building teams, like people love that on resumes now. I'll also say that the industry is in a period of tremendous growth. And everyone has simultaneously realized that they need to build a security team from scratch. And so if you have any interest in management whatsoever, it's an incredibly easy time to make that switch for a small company.
Yeah, spot on. For the record, I bounce back and forth between management and engineering more times than I can count, so you can always go back and then switch. So I want to dive in a little bit to misconceptions or preconceptions. Before you became a manager, I'm sure each of you, like many people in the audience, same as I, had some preconceived notion or perception of what management was. Has that changed now that you've been a manager? I know some of you are 6 to 9 months into this. How has that changed, if it has? Start this up.
Sure. I think I underestimated like how critical and important the people management part of being an engineering manager is. I had some vision that I'd be like a commander of the team setting the vision, and like we're going to work on these cool products. And I knew about the people management part a little bit. But I underestimated first how difficult it is to do well. I still struggle with that, and I'm still like on the, Sharon, you talked about like reading books and going to trainings. I think I haven't stopped that. And I don't think I ever will. But I've just have realized how critical and important that is for the team, and how really that should be my number one all the time. And the other things are nice if I can get to them.
And when I first started management, I felt like I had to be the one that knows about everything, because otherwise I would just look bad in front of my reports. And that turned out to be very, very draining for yourself. Like if you have to push yourself to be the most knowledgeable in both technical and the management side, you're just going to be suffering the trap. So later on, I kind of feel like the better way to be a manager is to not too much attach to the management role or the halo, but more to be a partner in solving problem with them together. So that's how my perspective changed after I became a manager.
I think one of my biggest fears when I was kind of looking over the fence into potentially moving into management was, to be honest, what do you do all day? I felt like as an IC, it was very clear to see, the different programs, the different projects, assessments, what have you, that people were working on. But management just felt like this fuzzy thing that I didn't fully understand. And I was legitimately concerned that as soon as I made the switch, I'd be just like hanging out, twiddling my thumbs, maybe taking some meetings, but wasn't really sure what I was supposed to do. And so that's not the case. I'm definitely way busier than I thought I would be. And so I think it's hard to understand, what it actually takes, because a lot of the things that managers are doing are essentially kind of putting seeds and building for the future. And so that it just wasn't as immediately accessible to me as an IC. But I promise you, there will be a lot for you to do if you decide to make that jump.
I think I underestimated the sheer magnitude of chaos that you're rodeoing as a manager in security. I had a flavor for it, having been a security engineer for a while, but it really greatly exceeds your expectations especially when you first get into it as a new manager. There's usually a few month period of like, oh God, what have I done? Followed by, wow, this is actually kind of entertaining. And then I am ruined for normal jobs.
For me, I think I went into management thinking like you're given all this responsibility. It can be a little isolating. You need to kind of be a one-man army as a manager. And I've definitely learned like your support system as a manager is even more critical than your support system as an IC. Like you're going to come up with some of the weirdest challenges day to day, and you need someone to talk to, and it can't always be the people that work for you.
It shouldn't be the people that work for you.
So you need other managers to talk to bounce ideas off of, to get ideas and things like that. So this session here was kind of born of our support structure where we all talk to each other all the time.
Awesome. So we got about 5 minutes left, and what I want to leave the audience with from each of you is one piece of advice. If somebody's trying to move from engineering into management, especially like Daed, you said, right now is a great time to do this in our industry. One piece of advice for that person. Chris?
Just start doing it today. Don't wait. Look at all the things that your leader is doing or where you want to go and just start doing it. At some point, people will recognize it. This person's doing that stuff already. They're on the path to the next thing to be a manager.
Yeah, I think exactly what Chris said. These things can always change back and forth, and just try it for a couple months. If it's not a good fit for you or you don't like it, there's always path for you to roll back.
Yeah, I mean, I think having the commitment there is important, but I also would recognize that those opportunities aren't always going to be available where you are. So being kind of selfish and driving your career, if that's something you really want to do, go full on, pursue it, go for it.
And I would add to that very tactically, talk to us, talk to other leaders like we know who's hiring. Everybody's building a team right now. Your network is going to be your best tool in landing that first management role.
I think also on the team that you're on now, you may have several other coworkers. One person, if your manager leaves, there's probably going to be only one person who can replace them. You should be a leader on your team today, take responsibility, take ownership of things you wouldn't normally grab, and show that you are the best candidate for that role well before it becomes available.
Yeah, I would say, I want to chime in on that. Advice I give to a lot of people who are trying to go into a management or leadership position is don't doubt yourself. I think a lot of us have imposter syndrome. We always feel like we're not good enough, we don't know enough, we can do something to be better. Most people I know who got into security management didn't know what they were doing. They were talented, they were driven, and they cared about security. They were evangelical about security. That's what got them in. Just don't doubt yourself. If you do want to get into management, take that leap, do it. Reach out to other engineering managers in the industry. Most people I know are very willing to talk. You can come talk to any of us after this talk or here at this con or another con. Building that support network and putting the self-doubt aside is key if you're going to get into security management. So we do have about 3 minutes left. We can't take a lot of questions, but are there any questions in the audience that we can answer? Go ahead.
Should I wait for the mic?
If you have a loud voice, no. Otherwise, yes.
Hi, my name is Maria. So the current situation is that my company might not have something for me in the near future. Like, I know that I want to get into management someday, and I'm looking forward to career advancement. But how long should one wait? Or should I stay or should I go? And that question is I think is very hard. So I'd like to know what your thoughts are.
So one comment I want to give is that there are other form of management than formal people management. There are technical leaderships or kind of other leadership roles where you drive projects to finish, where you lead a bunch of engineers on a big project, and maybe work across organizations and get something to this finish line. So those are all kind of leadership skills that you can acquire. And depending on how much of those are available in your company, you might have more time to try those before you switch to a different company.
I think it depends how good your support structure is. If you have people that you can kind of lean on to help you through the process, even if you're starting a new company in the broader community here, just go for it. If it's new for you, if you're like most of the people that you know in security are at your company, I would wait a while and build on that.
You don't have to have a management title to lead. Like, you have permission to lead right now. So I think you can go back to your company tomorrow and just start practicing those skills. And at some point, maybe someone will recognize that. And if not, then you'll be in a really great position to go somewhere else and talk about all of that stuff that you just practiced.
I will say this is kind of a trap for minority employees a lot of the time, though. Like if you're doing the work without the title, then it becomes hard to get the next thing, and you kind of thrown away time you could be spending under title somewhere else.
Sure, yeah. I mean, just generically, I'm just thinking practicing leading wherever.
Absolutely.
All right, that's a good question. I do think we are out of time, though.
Yes, you are.
Unfortunately, so if there are more questions, we're happy to stick around. You can reach out to any of us.